Sonny, how are we?
Very well, thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming on. This has all been last minute. Everything we've done in the past week has been very last minute, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've only just recovered from the run. My calves are in bits.
That doesn't surprise me even slightly. Since the age of 11, you would probably call yourself an Olympic weightlifter. However, life is a little bit different now. So what would you categorize yourself as at this point?
I'm more I feel like now I'm more of an Olympic weightlifting coach than anything else, and business owner, or at least running multiple businesses.
So over the years, wrestling with the identity of being an athlete, how has that evolved in the past couple of years? Because there's been a real change of living situation, location, lots of things going on for you that I'm sure you're reflecting on currently, but weightlifting is still a huge part of your life. But given that it's business owner and weightlifting coach now, are you at peace with that, or is there still an itch to scratch?
I don't think there's an itch to scratch anymore. I think for me, my goal as an athlete was always to become an Olympian. That's what I set out to do and dreamed of doing as a kid from the age of 11. And I was fortunate enough to do that when I was 23 years old. So the last 7 years really for me has been shifting towards, business and creating a life from what I've done as an athlete. I still love and I'm so passionate about Olympic weightlifting. It's still a style of training that I really enjoy. But as, like you said, things have evolved over the last few years, I'm starting now to explore new avenues of training, more for just an excitement standpoint, I'm very good at Olympic weightlifting and I go in and that is my comfort zone. But there's no better feeling than doing something that you suck at and then, pursuing the ability to be able to get better at, which is very hard for me to do now in Olympic weightlifting, more than anything, given that my lifestyle is not like it was when I was being a full-time athlete.
I think I've just realised you're the only person I've ever had on the podcast that can squat more than me, which is really upsetting. I'm having an identity crisis as I'm asking you questions about your identity, but Olympic weightlifting is a niche sport. It's not something that's easily accessed in youth settings. It's criminally underfunded like a lot of minor Olympic sports. So at the age of 11, what was it that drew you to it in the first instance?
Yeah, it's a good question. I totally agree with you about the funding and the popularity of it. It's changed massively thanks to CrossFit. That's really brought a spotlight on the discipline for sure. But I think for me at 11, I was fortunate enough to go to a school that had an Olympic weightlifting gym in it and a club. And it was one of only 4 clubs in the country or schools in the country that offered Olympic weightlifting. So it was by chance really that I'd fallen into the sport. Golf was my pursuit before that, which again, I still very much enjoy. And I think more than anything, it was the fact that it was an Olympic sport was the thing that attracted to me. I had no aspirations to look at weightlifting and go, that looks really cool, I want to do weightlifting, because to be honest with you, I didn't feel that way about it. And weightlifting is a very difficult sport to, understand unless you're in it. You get no perception of the people that are performing it, the hard work that goes into being good at it, which I noticed from a very early stage. But nonetheless, it was an Olympic sport and it became my vehicle to get there.
How did you manage the single focus, the singular existence, the very self-driven metrics of it? Because versus typical sports at that age, you've got exposure to this, team sports here, trying football, trying rugby, trying hockey, all these sort of various UK standard sports that I guess are much less isolated, much less dependent on you as an individual and don't require so much discipline, focus that all comes down to the person at the middle of it. So versus your peers, did you feel different pursuing that sport and building from the ground upwards with that singular focus of the Olympics in mind? Did it isolate you at all?
100%. And I think when I first started weightlifting, there was probably 60 people in my year that started weightlifting at the start of school. Within the first 6 months, I'd say half of them had stopped. Within the first year, there was probably only about 6 of us that were still doing the sport. And then within about 2 or 3 years within there, it was just myself and one other person. So I think that plays a huge part in it. The thing that, though, with that being said, and I haven't thought about it like this before, I love that about weightlifting, the fact that it is down to you when it comes to your training. What you put in is what you get out, and you have no one else to blame. And that's something that's really nice about, individual sport, in the sense that when you get the chance to stand up and compete and to train, it's you and that bar, and you know the hard work that you've put in to be there, and that can give you a level of confidence in performance. But equally, you know, when things necessarily haven't gone your way, you'll start to be able to self-criticize and look back at, okay, this is probably where I dropped the ball here, which makes it easier, I think, in reflection on performance, to be able to gauge your progress and gauge what's having a positive effect and what's having a negative effect.
How was your confidence versus the footballers, the rugby players in your teenage years? Did you feel more in control of your own abilities and expressing yourself because you'd put yourself in that single discipline focus? Or did you feel that the lack of a team setting or the lack of a conventional route made you a little bit different?
Yeah, I think you have to be a little bit weird to want to do weightlifting anyway, given the fact that it wasn't a very popular sport. And me as a young kid was quite shy, and I'd say I wasn't the most, out there kid. But through my early successes in weightlifting, it certainly gave me confidence as a young age, because I'd found something that I was very good at. I was known as the kid at school, the strong kid at school, which, again, I think it did help bring me out of myself in my early years, because I did have great success at such a young age. As a sport like weightlifting, it's, I don't want to say easy, but easier than most sports to get to a point where you can compete for your country. At the age of 13, I was competing internationally, and that did wonders for me as a young athlete to kind of find who I was and myself in the sporting world.
So when did the potential for the Olympics become a reality for you? Because obviously any sport that you have the propensity to get to the Olympics in, there'll always be that back of the head, oh, maybe I could do it, if you're in a sport that can get there. But for you, when did that dream start to become a pathway?
Yeah, I was very fortunate in the fact that when I started Olympic weightlifting, I was coached by someone who had been to the Olympic Games. And I think that plays such a huge factor in anyone's career as a sporting athlete. You know, to be exposed to someone who's already achieved what you want to achieve at such an early start, or so early on in my career, made me be able to see right in front of me what I wanted was achievable. And a lot of the time when I think people aspire to great heights in any sporting venture, it can seem like a dream if you're doing something that you don't know anyone else that's done it. Whereas for me, because I was exposed to that, it made it a reality from a very young age. You know, I remember my coach turning around to me within the first year and said, look, the best things, the two things that you can achieve as a British Olympic weightlifter is represent your country in the Olympic Games and win a Commonwealth gold. And that's as good as it gets as a British weightlifter. So from an early stage, I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And it felt real because I was being told by an Olympian.
So when that, I think Olympians, I don't know, maybe my perception of it's a little bit different now, because I've had Nick Simmons on the podcast. I've had Dan Wallace on the podcast. They're the two Olympians. Guy Learmonth competed at the Commonwealth Games in the 800. All very, very high-performing athletes, but all very human. And I think when you're a teenager, I mean, I think generally speaking, up until recently with the rise of social media, Olympians have been put on such a big pedestal that unless you had a coach in front of you that actually made it, you might not have been able to believe that these people on the stage at the Olympics were actually human beings that you could become. Because it's such a pinnacle of sport, isn't it, that it can become inconceivable unless something makes it a reality for you, which it sounds like you had with your coach. So I know you were very excited about when the 2012 bid was won. You were in a classroom and there was I think you saw, there were celebrities you saw jumping up and down when that was announced. And that's when I can imagine the dream and the roadmap towards Rio was really paved. So qualification, talk us through what you had to do to get to Rio. Yeah,
qualification for the Olympics is probably one of the most challenging things as an Olympic weightlifter. It's not like in many other sports where a country would be allocated so many spots and then you'd fight it out for that spot. We had to work as a team prior to 2016 to gain one male spot for the British men's team. And then it became a showdown essentially at the British Championships that year as to who was going to take that spot. And it was quite evident on that given day who it was between. There's about four of us that were very close. and it was just best man on the day wins. So it made for probably one of the most exciting weightlifting competitions that I've ever been a part of. And to be honest, that day of competing was far more exciting than the actual day of the Olympics, other than the prestige of competing at the Olympics.
How did you deal with the pressure of that British Championships? Because it sounds like the stakes were about as high as they possibly could have been and arguably ever were. And it's difficult to expose yourself to that sort of pressure until you're actually in the pressure itself.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it comes back to a little bit what we were talking about a moment ago, in the sense that for me, leading into that competition, I ensured that I left no stone unturned. So for me, what that meant was making sure that I was doing everything, not only in my training, but outside of my training, from a recovery, from a nutrition standpoint, and from a preparation standpoint, so that on that given day, I could stand there and know whatever happened, I was ready for it, and I could just do my best, and the rest will be. And that's something that I think is super valuable in any sporting effort, if you like, or competition environment. If you can stand there and truly feel like you've done everything to be in that shape, there is no pressure. You can go out there and enjoy your performance, and let the rest be.
That's very aligned with how I view things now. The question I always ask myself is, have I done everything I could have done within the circumstances available to me to be stood at the start line? And if the answer is yes, it doesn't fucking matter what happens next. Just enjoy the process. Events are victory laps is the way I like to view them. I'm not very competitive anymore. Since rugby career ended, that kind of died with it for me. But I like self-driven competition, and I think it's even easier potentially for you to see it that way, because it's, does the barbell go over your head or doesn't it, which makes it very black and white.
Yeah, and to be honest, I agree with you in the sense that that's what separated me from finishing 14th in the Olympics and, potentially being a medalist or reaching the highest heights of this sport, was the fact that I've never been competitive either. And it sounds weird because you see someone that competes at the highest level but isn't a competitive person. Don't get me wrong, I like to do the best that I can do, but when I look at some of the athletes I've been surrounded by over the years, the likes of Matt Fraser, for example, there's an inner burn for people like that where they want to win at all costs and want to beat everyone around them. And I see that fire in people and I admire it, but it's something that I never had as an athlete.
Yeah, I think it's not something you can develop within yourself beyond a certain point either. I think that's nature, not nurture. Very much so, because I think Matt Fraser's quotes on competitiveness and drive are about as to the point as it possibly can be. But on that, CrossFit's done a huge amount to popularise weightlifting, which, as we've said, niche, underfunded sport in the past. So have you. And that probably all began with you arriving at the Olympics with your hat on backwards. So it's always been important to you, hasn't it, to try and bring what is quite a traditional sport into the modern world more. So I guess, what do you think the biggest barriers that have been overcome with that since your time at the Olympics have been?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned a moment ago about social media, I was very fortunate to have grown up in the realm of social media, and that in itself is giving us the ability to expose weightlifting a hell of a lot more than it ever has done. And I guess my goal really with everything that I've kind of done in the sport of weightlifting is to want to make it more accessible to the masses. And I think about the things that make weightlifting difficult for people to do outside of the fact that, there's now a lot more places where you can go in and there's free weights, there's barbell. Most gyms now have free weights and barbell, which is amazing, which wasn't the case many years ago. So people have the equipment and the facilities to be able to do the sport. But you think about the limiting factors in weightlifting, the technique, the mobility that's required of it is probably higher than many, many other sports that you can do in a gym setting. So that's really what stemmed my want to make the learning process easier for people, provide solutions to help people move better to be able to perform the sport, which I think naturally has made it more exciting for people to want to get into, because the barrier to entry is lower than what it was.
And downstream of that, for you individually, which we'll come on to, you're now in a very powerful, mobile, adaptable position to be able to explore a lot of new things with your training, given that you've got to a point in your life, similarly to me, where you're kind of questioning, why am I doing the things that I'm doing with my training and what's giving me the most enjoyment? But I bet it probably hasn't helped you golf much.
No,
because nothing does.
Nothing does. But it's funny you say that. I think, you know, having good range of motion, having good foundation of strength, being a powerful person, it does lend itself to a lot of other sports in the same way that, you know, for so many young kids nowadays, like if you think, right, what am I going to get my child into, say gymnastics, because they do gymnastics at a young age, regardless of what sport they do, it's going to lend them very well to other sports, you know. For me personally, yes, the attributes I have as an athlete, my strength, my power, and my mobility is helpful trying other sports. But I think above anything else, my understanding of the technical execution of Olympic weightlifting, again, allows you to understand techniques of other sports and apply similar processes to be able to master them, you know.
Total at the Olympics, 333, was it?
Yeah.
Was that your best ever total?
No, I did 3-4. I think I did 3-4-2 at the qualifiers.
So you actually, I guess you had to, of course, didn't you? You had to gun for that one place so hard that you probably actually weren't in the best condition for when it mattered most.
That's the same for a lot of minor sports when it comes to the Olympics. And in weightlifting, you see that massively anyway. People peak for the qualification event, and then by the time they actually get to the main event, they're in bits. You know, it's different in other sports, or I'm saying for maybe other athletes, where they can breeze through qualification to get to the Olympics and peak for the Olympic event. It's not the case in weightlifting.
That seems inherently flawed, but I guess is necessary within the structures at play to be able to get there. Are there any solutions or thoughts you've had on how that could be adjusted? Because it doesn't make sense objectively. If the goal of the Olympics from a national point of view is to get your best athletes performing at their best for the nation, surely there must be a better solution.
Yeah, but you think about where weightlifting is at now as a sport. They're reducing weight categories each year. They're reducing the amount of places each year for the Olympics. I kind of feel for the athletes now that, you know, I was fortunate enough to go in 2016, the last time they had the old weight categories and all the weight categories competing. You know, the last couple of years, they've not done every single weight category. They've not had full rosters of athletes competing. So if you were to compare the results from an Olympic Games to a World Championships, the World Championships would be so much better because of the depth in other countries that they would just never get a chance to compete. And it's unfortunate really now for the athletes that do compete in that, because it's not the same as it would be classically in weightlifting. And I do believe, as great as weightlifting is as a classical Olympic sport, it needs to modernize. It needs to follow trends of other sports and other old Olympic sports to make it more exciting.
And you've done a lot of work on that. And I think 2017 is an important part of the story. We don't need to go into full context. You've explained that in lots of detail on other podcasts, but you were dealt a 7-year ban in 2017. It was originally a shorter ban, but then it was extended for
coaching,
extenuating reasons for the first time, wasn't it? So I know you emptied your life savings trying to overturn the legality of it all and all that sort of stuff, but here we are, and I think it expired in June 2024, didn't it?
Yeah,
technically,
just recently.
So overcoming that, given your love for the sport, given your commitment to it, and then still continuing to basically invest all of your time into modernising that passion, how has that journey been for you as an individual?
Yeah, look, I think I look back on that moment of, you know, what was probably the worst possible thing that could have happened to me in that given time. And I look back on it now, and that was the fire starter really to everything that I went on to do from a business and education standpoint post that. And I look back on that and think, for me personally, it was really an amazing thing that happened to me. Most people from the outside looking in would say, okay, it was terrible what had happened. But at the same time, I look at every successful person that I've ever met. Everyone that is successful in whatever they do has experienced a level of adversity that has generally propelled them on to do great things. And that's exactly what that was for me. And it comes back to like we were saying about identity. As much as weightlifting was my vehicle to the Olympics, I'm still extremely passionate about the sport. it doesn't define who I am. And that's where now I'm utilizing the skills, the lessons I've learned as an athlete now to, again, help people excel in the sport of weightlifting as well. But I feel like I have a lot more to give, not only in that, to be able to help people achieve all sorts of sporting feats.
So a lot of the skills that you developed as an athlete, the pressures you've been dealt and ridden through, then become translatable skills to day-to-day life. And there's been a lot of change in the past few years. I know you spent a long time in Australia. You're now moving over to Dubai. You're currently sat here waiting for your visas to come through so you can actually go. But you've mentioned a few times that you wanted to build a life after the vehicle of Olympic weightlifting has sort of got you to this point. What does success mean to you within the context of that life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like you said, I'm going through so many changes personally at the moment in terms of my living location. I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot, and I love traveling. I love being able to help people improve and get better at Olympic weightlifting. I still, regardless of anything that I do, gain so much from that. But I think for me, experience is probably the most valuable thing that I want from life. I'm getting to a point now where I don't know if it's because I've hit 30 or what, but things that I've never thought about, whether it be building a family and things like that, and having a place where I settle and can call home, have started to become something that is on my radar. Just purely on the basis that, like, I've done so many amazing things in my life and experienced so many amazing things, but there's one thing that I've had in periods of this life or periods of these travel before that brings me back to thinking, you know what, I'd love to be able to share this with someone and go and do the cool things that I do with someone else. And I think from a personal pursuit, that is something that I desire. I gain a lot of fulfillment from what I do, and I have a purpose which a lot of people don't have at my age. But even thinking about that and talking about that now, there's like this worry that you have of what's coming next, or what's the next thing that I need to do. And I have to grab myself every now and then from sitting with that thought about always worrying what's coming in the future, and instead of actually just embracing and enjoying what I'm doing right now. And it's not the easiest thing to do sometimes because I'm an ambitious person and I'm always thinking about what's next. But again, it comes back down to that very simple saying of, like, enjoy the process or enjoy the journey. I still have to remind myself of that all the time, and bringing myself back to thinking about just the basics of what I'm grateful for each day, the opportunities that arise to me each day, and really being proud of the fact that I get to do those things is what I think is so important in this journey.
You touched on something there that I've never really considered in terms of definitions, which is ambition versus competitiveness. Because I describe my biggest challenge is being present and enjoying the here and now rather than thinking about how the here and now leads to that thing, to then turn that into that thing and then keep moving, and then at what point does it end? And that is very similar in terms of the vehicle to competitiveness. But the only difference is it's UVU versus UV somebody else. So where do you think that ambition comes from? And why do you think it never manifested as competitive against other people?
I think for me with that, it's only really been in the last year that I've probably had that self-awareness to understand what's important to me in terms of my ambition for success in business, for the lifestyle that I want to create, the life I want to create. It's come from understanding really who I am and what's important to me, and the things that bring me happiness, the things that bring me pleasure, and the difference between those two things, to understand really what's important to me and what I want from life. And I think as a byproduct of that, that's what's really allowed me to have a better understanding of my ambitions and what are the ambitions that are going to fuel the things that are important to me and what are the ones that are not. And it allows you to be a hell of a lot more selective about where you invest your time and energy. You know, as a business owner yourself, you'll know that you can sit up at every waking moment thinking about something else that you could be doing to drive your business further. or you can actually take the time to go, do you know what, I'm going to have a few days off to just have some time to myself and fill another cup up that, okay, isn't going to lead to the growth of my business, but it is going to fulfill me in a way that is important. So I guess in answer to your question, it's having my own self-awareness of my own, what's important to me, that's allowed me then to decide what I'm ambitious about and what's important to me there.
We spoke very briefly at the track about the evolution and the self-awareness that you've developed in the past year, coming from a bit of a challenge with your mental health. I'm in a little bit of one myself at the moment, just with so many changes. There's a lot of things that are sort of ready to drop, but are very slowly moving to that dropping point. So it's just dealing with the day-to-day to get there can feel challenging, and I've obviously gone through many challenges in the past, so I'm utilising those skills. But yeah, I feel like I'm going through some personal changes at my end as well. But for anyone listening that might not have a purpose or a sense of fulfillment, as you've said, we're both very lucky to have that at the age that we do. What are the things that you've learnt in developing that self-awareness in the past year that have yielded the most results for you?
Yeah, I think, as human beings, like, we thrive off routine. It's something that is extremely important for us to feel secure, to feel safe. And there's certain things that we can design in our lives that allow us to have routine. And sometimes when you live a very busy and crazy schedule, which I'm sure some of the people listening do, it's hard sometimes to stick to like core foundations of things that make you feel good, almost like your non-negotiables. And I know for me, like in terms of when I feel my best, the basics of sleeping really well is so important to me. The diet, being consistent with my diet is super important to me. And when I say consistent with my diet, I'm not counting every macro that I'm eating, but I'm aware of what I'm putting in my body and the importance that has on how I feel. And then coming away from that, things like, for me, having alone time with myself in the morning, going for a walk, simple things to actually have a mental check-in, if you like, with myself to really process my feelings before I get stuck into a day. And then my training, of course, being pivotal in that. And that's where I think now, you think I train hard, but I train hard because that is the foundation of me feeling good in my life. So those basic things, I think, that we can put into our lives is super important to be able to feel in control of your mental health and give you those elements of stability whilst you're traveling. And understanding that allows you to apply thought process and energy into areas that you want to grow and develop. But if you don't get the foundations of your own happiness and how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis consistent, then it's very difficult to put energy into other things. And that's when you start to feel creative again, when you get those basics done. I know for me, like, I love to go out for dinners, go out for drinks and stuff, but I'm also very aware of the effect that has on me for 2 or 3 days later when I'm not performing at like 100%. I'm kind of at like 80. And then you start to look at the things that you do in your life, the benefit of them versus the negative, and you go, after a while, I would actually much rather avoid drinking every single weekend because I don't want to feel shit for 2 days afterwards, or I want to make healthier life choices from an eating standpoint because of how I look and how my body performs and how that makes me feel. So it all comes down to that, like, what's important to you? What's the highest priority? Do you want to wake up and feel good and be able to pursue new challenges and put energy into a new endeavor? You need to get those basics right so you're in a position to be able to do that. And I'd say I've been through a lot of changes in the last 3 to 6 months because I'm now starting to look at things that I want to go and achieve and do, and other things aren't aligning with that. And I've built good habits over the period of the last few weeks that, again, now when I'm eating out and I'm looking at a menu, instead of going for what I normally would, I'm going, well, no, I'm going to make a slightly healthier choice than I normally would. And basic things like that now are starting to trickle into my day-to-day thinking rather than it being a conscious effort.
The compounding effect of that can happen very quickly as well, can't it?
It can. It's literally been a 3 to 6 week process for me. And I think about that, like when you think about quitting smoking or something like that, and people say, oh, once you get through the first 3 weeks, you start to break that habit, it becomes easier. 3 weeks can feel like a lifetime at the start of making a change, because it does require a huge amount of effort in those first 3 weeks with any new habit that you're trying to build. But after that starts to sink in, then you start to have it happening subconsciously.
It gives a lot more power to small wins on a day-to-day basis, where I think anyone that might be struggling or questioning things doesn't allocate that power. Like if you used to get a coffee and a croissant in the morning after you've had your breakfast on the way into work, maybe it's just the coffee. You avoid the croissant. Whilst that might feel like such a small, if you've got body composition goals or training goals, there's nothing wrong with a croissant in and of itself. Believe me, I've had plenty of coffee and croissants in my time. But if there's a like you've said, if there's a set of priorities where removing the croissant from that equation might equal the outcome that you're looking for, the power that wrestling with yourself mentally and deciding, you know what, I'm just going to have the coffee today, can spill into the next decision, and that decision can spill into the next. And before you know it, the one that comes on day 4, you'll wrestle with yourself less, and the momentum that comes from that can be huge. Yeah.
There's 2 things that I think about with that. And the first one, I think when we talk about this from having felt the benefit of good habit building, for someone who's right at the start of their journey, who wants to make a change, they don't know how good it feels yet to have the benefit of that change. So when people say like the hardest bit is just starting, or the hardest bit is just the first bit, it is, because as soon as you get that dopamine hit from the feel good factor from making that consistently good choice, once you've had a taste of it, that's what becomes addictive, feeling good, getting in great shape and seeing yourself in the mirror and feeling great about how you feel. You go, well, actually, I don't want to go back to that other guy that I've seen before, because that definitely doesn't make me feel good. And this is where I think that can be so hard, but this is where I think surrounding yourself with people that are also making good choices and have the things that you aspire to have, whether that be from a business standpoint, from a family standpoint, from a physical standpoint, surrounding yourself with those types of people is extremely important. And that's something that's one of the key reasons that Dubai is such an attractive move for me as well, because it's very easy to surround yourself with other people that are on the same mission as you. And that can be like one of the first steps for people when you're trying to think about, you may have this dream in the back of your head about something that you really want to achieve and do. You may not have said it out loud yet, but I think one of the most important things to do in those early stages is work out how you can edge yourself or design a life around other people that are doing that, because it makes things 10 times easier to become a reality. It goes back to what we were just speaking about a moment ago. When I started my career as a weightlifter, I was daily surrounded by someone who'd done what I wanted to do. And all of a sudden, that became a reality for me.
Do you have any training goals currently? Are there any boxes you want to tick off? Is there a handicap you want to get to? I assume there's not a new weight. I assume you're probably never going to hit a lifetime PB ever again, I'd imagine, because you'd have to go feral, full, all or nothing weightlifter again to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But are there is there anything that's sort of becoming more front of mind for you as something that you're fascinated by?
Nothing that's becoming super clear, but I definitely know parameters of what's making me feel good. I'm really enjoying at the moment running, albeit slow, but running 5K a week, and I would like to comfortably be able to run like a 25-minute 5K would be like great. I'd like to be able to do that at a good pace. I'd like to still be able to squat 250 kilos, snatch 150 kilos, clean and jerk 190. Like if I can do all of those things at once, but then also from a physical, physique standpoint, be happy with how I'm looking. That's kind of what I want to do. I don't have any burning targets to achieve. The last time I had a burning target in anything was to hit the 200 kilo clean and jerk. And that's the last target I was sadistic about working towards.
It's a ridiculous number.
But again, I had to change so much other aspects in my life in order to make that a reality. And it's weird because you think about what the industry is like at the moment now. Everyone is starting to change the style in which they're training a lot more to be able to do a lot of things pretty well. But again, health in itself and people's actual nutritional health is becoming so much more important to them from a longevity standpoint. And I work majority with clients that are over the age of 40 years old. And you'd be surprised, or maybe not yourself, but the amount of people that are coming to me and go, they're 40 now, they don't want to lose what they have as they progress to 50 years old. And that's where, like, you know, does weightlifting serve that for people? In a lot of ways, yes, but not at its most elite level. Not at its, like, I'm trying to snatch 150 kilos level.
That's the important thing, though, is that what people forget, and I think a load of people that put training content on the internet in London forget, is that 99.9% of people aren't trained to be the best in the world at the thing that they do. They're doing it to be better versions of themselves. And the difference between trying to go to the Olympics as an Olympic weightlifter and using it as a tool to understand biomechanics, move your body, get some technical skill acquisition wins that don't really relate too much to the weight on the bar every single time you go into the gym, commit to something 3-4 times a week, have your kids seeing that you do something cool, getting in better shape, making better nutritional habits. All that stuff is brilliant. And it doesn't matter what the weight is on the bar. If it's moving up, then that's a great place to be. Yeah. And I think that's why I've always loved training this way from a non-competitive, other than with myself standpoint, and have done since sort of 2017 onwards, really, is that curiosity leads the way for me. If something is fascinating and I'm interested by it, I've let go of the ego that used to stop me from trying it, because I know how much value there is in giving something a go and sort of building the wings as I fly, rather than just holding on to things that I've built over time. Because you'll know, you don't need to do nearly as much squat volume as you used to be able to squat 250 kilos. You could probably squat once every 3 weeks and be able to squat 500 pounds for 5 whenever you wanted, which is, again, is irritating, because there's not normally somebody on the other side of the microphone that can hit those numbers. Squatting is all I've got. That's all I've got these days. And I can't even do it at the moment because I've got a hip injury.
There you go. Yeah, well, again, come back to what you said, the extreme of, like, what I do from an extreme standpoint, my biggest lifts, the craziest complexes and stuff that I do, all that more than anything highlights my skill level in that sport. But the enjoyment and the benefit of my sport practice is coming at lifting way less than that.
Yep.
Consistently, and building good movement patterns at lighter weights in order to get the benefit of Olympic weightlifting in my day-to-day life. And again, I think it's a valuable thing for anyone to understand when you look to your coach, to your idols, to the things that you consume on social media. You're being exposed to the extremes of the sports very, very easily, not the actual vast majority of practice of the sport.
200 kilo clean and jerk. The sacrifice, focus, and sadistic drive that you had to pull the thread on to get to that, the feeling that you had of actually achieving it versus how you expected to feel, did they align, or were they different? Because I'm sure that you sacrificed some things that you said that you'd acknowledged were beneficial to you to go in pursuit of that big, scary weight. So how did it feel? Was it what you expected?
Yeah, do you know what? For the first time in a long time, when it comes to something like that, I'd say it was. There was a great sense of achievement for having done that. I think before you sit down in pursuit of anything like that, you have to be comfortable with the things that you're going to have to sacrifice in order to achieve it anyway. And if those things don't sit well with you, you tend to not achieve the target anyway, because that's when you'll start to let things slip. So for me, yes, it was a great thing to tick a box, but when I think about something like that, it's such a selfish pursuit sometimes to achieve, like, okay, I can clean 200 kilos and clean up 200 kilos and it's an amazing thing. It's so selfish, and it's only really me wanting to prove to myself that I could do something like that is the benefit of it. So it did what I needed it to do for me. Did it change my life afterwards? No, it didn't. And I quite quickly, for about maybe 4 months afterwards, I didn't really want to clean and jerk. I think I just stopped clean and jerking because I was like, I ticked that box. And when you look at it like that, or on reflection, like having that kind of I guess ambition to achieve a certain goal in the long run can sometimes be negative when you set yourself a target like that to achieve, because you start to build a bad relationship with the thing that you enjoy doing. And I think that's like when someone has a weight goal that they want to get down to, and once you've got down to that weight goal, people go and they balloon out afterwards because they've hit that goal, rather than actually making a lifestyle change that allows you to gain the enjoyment of doing the thing, you know?
Yeah, you get to the top of the mountain, coming down isn't, I mean, it can be, but once you've seen the view, you can't go any higher.
Yeah, and this is an important thing, I think, for people to understand around when you're setting goals and setting targets for yourself, like understanding, okay, what is going to be the byproduct benefit of what I'm trying to do here, rather than the actual thing. And I think that allows you to reach a goal or a target and actually have an extended enjoyment from having got there. And we'll use bodyweight for example, because I think it's an easy one that we can all relate to here. If someone is overweight and they get cut down to 90 kilos from 110 kilos, let's say, so they'll lose the weight. And just because you hit the number on the scale, instead of thinking about, okay, I hit the number, thinking about when you're setting that target at 90 kilos, getting down to 90 kilos is going to allow me to feel like I've got more energy. I'm going to be able to wear a certain type of clothes that I'm wanting to wear. I'm going to be able to go out and enjoy my food a little bit better without feeling bad about my meal choices. Or, you know, these are all byproduct benefits of losing the weight. If you think about any goal target that you're trying to achieve, I think surrounding it with the actual benefits make it much easier to sustain that change when you get there.
That's huge part of why I think powerlifting stopped doing it for me, and why all this stuff now does. And I had a conversation the other day that summarized it really nicely, which was, I don't really have any interest anymore in going further. I've done a double Ironman. I've ran 250k in one go. What's next? A triple Ironman, 500k.
When does it stop?
It's pointless, and it just sounds silly for the sake of it. I'm just doing it because it's further or faster. I'm not that driven by doing a faster Ironman. I've gone sub 5 in a mile. I'm currently training for a best effort marathon. I'll box off sub 3, and then beyond that, probably won't care. So the third F is funner. And I think that's the real key. And I think that's what I'm struggling with at the moment, is what's the perfect balance of things that are fulfilling for me and serve the process of training for them more than the end goal in themselves. I think training for the 250, the end goal became such a big project and such a big thing that I actually lost sight of enjoying the process along the way. And I think at its core, what I really enjoy is the difficulty of balancing top-end strength with a specific time-oriented goal, like 500-pound squat, sub 5-minute mile, like 1,200-pound powerlifting total, sub 12-hour Ironman. That's the sort of stuff that, because there'll be some weeks I go into training and on paper, move this weight, hit this time, and I'm just on my arse. I'm like, oh, interesting. Why has that happened? Let's unpack it. Let's analyze why that's happened. Let's think about what I've done here and make a change here and see what happens. That tinkering week to week is what I've enjoyed. And I think that's probably the direction I'll go back in a little bit more next year, to have fun with it, because further, faster, for me personally, I'm not saying I've completed it, mate, but for me personally, for what I want to achieve from things, it's not an ever-increasing scale. What that leads towards climbing Mount Everest, and then you're risking your life. It's just all this sort of stuff. It's diminishing returns. But I think that's where the narrative of reframing things is, how do you make sure that things are serving you along the way, rather than just when you get to the date in the diary. That's the absolute key.
And it's interesting because even hearing you speak about that, when you say like funner, when I think about, okay, where I've been at from a training perspective over the last 6 months, I'm such a people person. So I gain so much from like who I'm training with and the social aspect to training. And I think about like my change in training more than anything has been about being able to train with other people. And I think about my little crew that I've got in Dubai that I train with. Like, we've got a crew of 5 of us. It's great fun. It's great to suffer together and gain that enjoyment. And I don't know if it's because I was kind of like deprived of that in my individual sport as a weightlifter, but it really does align back with what I was saying around, okay, what's important to me at the moment, like that experience and that enjoyment that you get with someone else, or that I desire with someone else, I get that from when I'm training with other people as well. And again, that's kind of my fun now in training. It's being able to do something socially with someone whilst doing cool shit in the gym, you know.
And you could go into pretty much any gym in the world and do some pretty cool shit. I think any pure gym in the planet is at threat of having their squat record taken. So running, polar opposite to the singular moment, powerful focus of weightlifting, putting 200 kilos over your head versus going for a cruisy 30-minute 5K are two very, very different things. What have you discovered through exploring running that you didn't have access to with weightlifting? Because they're very different mental headspaces, they're very different focus points. Have you found benefits that have translated into your day-to-day life, or are you just enjoying the being a student again?
In being a student, I think it's a massive thing. I've not surrounded myself with someone who's necessarily educating me on running at this stage. I'm going out and running. I don't have an understanding of my times, how fast I'm going, how to take that jump from running at the speed that I am to running faster, because at the stage that I'm in, with it being so new, that's not important to me yet. I'm actually just doing the thing and understanding how I feel about it. It is very different in the sense that you start to become more in tune with your breathing, and it's a extended battle with yourself when you're running, like, because it's like you have that first 10 minutes I've found where I'm just like, oh, I can just feel my heart rate going up, and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do the 30 minutes or get to the 5K. And then you get through that first 10 minutes, a bit like what you were saying a minute ago about your half marathon time, when you got through that 7K, and then you start to settle in. And that's in itself a really nice feeling when you start to feel settled in the run, which for me, the first few times never came because it was so difficult for me to just finish the 5K. But now I'm doing it more consistently. I'm starting to feel the enjoyment of that last 10 minutes of a run where I feel like I'm in a bit of a rhythm. And it's only been in the last, so just to give everyone a bit of context to this, I've probably only been running, I've probably only done about 25Ks in my life, and that's all the running that I've done. So still very, very new. It's only been in the last 2 or 3 runs that I've been going out that when I've got to 5K, I felt, okay, I could probably keep going now, albeit not very fast. I've started to unlock that. Okay, and now I'm starting to think maybe I could run 10K. And I think that's been the early stages for me. There's been absolutely zero carryover to Olympic weightlifting from doing running, other than my body composition is a hell of a lot better now. I'm doing that extended cardio alongside my CrossFit. But like you said, something that I've really enjoyed and I've been working on a lot in constructing my training now is balancing it with doing the strength training, and how that allots in a week to go, okay, the running isn't impacting the weightlifting and the weightlifting isn't impacting the running. But again, there's a component to my training from a bodybuilding aspect that I also want to include in it. So it's looking at how these 3 things marry up, so that I'm seeing progress, or at least maintenance in my weightlifting, whilst progressing in the other 2 areas, which is probably one of the most exciting parts of it all.
100%. And running is booming in popularity for a lot of the things that you just mentioned. And because of the accessibility of it, it doesn't cost a huge amount of money to get into at all. You can, for the most part, unless you live, I don't know, on a cliff or in a war zone or something, then you can open your front door and crack on. You can't do that with Olympic weightlifting, which means that for a lot of people, especially in Britain, even in a gym setting, there's a lot of cynicism or a lack of understanding around ollie lifting. So what case would you make for anyone listening that doesn't have much of a concept of the value and the benefit and the skill of Olympic lifting? What would your elevator pitch to them be as to why they should give it a go? Yeah,
I think, when you think about Olympic weightlifting in its purest practice, you're talking snatch and clean and jerk. And snatch is arguably, and I'm biased, but probably the coolest, but the hardest thing that you can do in a gym. And a lot of the time, people will avoid utilizing the snatch because of how hard it is. But what I'm starting to see a lot more is people that are driven from a business aspect or like the challenge of their day-to-day work, they thrive off trying to learn how to do the snatch because of how difficult it is. And because more and more people now are training, I'd say I've noticed in the last few years, the amount of people that are putting training or health and fitness high up on their priority list in their lives is grown massively. I've seen now that what people will invest in their health and fitness versus what they would 5 years ago change massively because it's important to them. And this is where now more people are starting to look at, okay, I'm now going to the gym, I'm going to class, I'm starting to feel fitter and healthier. They're starting to look up that list in terms of what's challenging, and they're seeing weightlifting at the top and they're wanting to do it. And I think that in itself is attracting more people to want to try it. Once you're in that realm and you're doing weightlifting and you can execute Olympic weightlifting very well, the benefit that you have that I'd say is most applicable to everyone here listening is you get strength and stability through a full range of motion, which no other sport really does for you. And that's the sort of thing that translates well to your day-to-day life, to your ability to play with your kids, to your ability to be able to feel athletic and agile in what you do. That's what weightlifting does. And that's what's starting to attract more and more people to it, I believe, because it does give you that all-round range of motion and strength.
And studies now reinforce that strength training through a full range of motion is just as, if not more effective than any static stretching or any sort of standardized mobility work, which people will allocate time to because they think that's what they need to be doing for their health and longevity. Whereas just adding a bit of resistance can have a huge, huge impact for, again, you mentioned it earlier, a lot of the conversations we have at Omnia with people are, especially in America, because I think they're a little bit more, well, one, health insurance premium, but two, because of the rampant capitalism and fact that you're on your own with healthcare, they're more conscious of ingredients, all that sort of thing. People hit a certain age or they have their first child and they look in a mirror, not body composition wise, but they look in a mirror and they start to look themselves in the eyes and ask themselves the questions of, am I doing everything that I can to squeeze the juice out of this life? And often, due to just familiarity with routine and structure and things, the answer is no. And that's where we both had conversations with people, I'm sure. Yeah, 40s, 50s, making the most of being able to do that. Strength training, skill acquisition, range of motion, mobility, understanding biomechanics, I think are all just as important as the sort of metrics and the aerobic development, all of the obvious things that underpin health and well-being. I am firmly of the opinion that you should be able to move through a full range of motion under load. Otherwise, you're missing a core component of your health and well-being. And again, the only people I know that can't really do that or reverse to it are those that are really pushing top-end running goals or top-end endurance goals and are fearful of strength training. But
you think about the type of person, and this is where I think people's mindsets changed, because it used to be like, hey, you get to 30 years old and then, okay, I'm going to just expect a natural decline in my health and my performance from a fitness standpoint. Whereas I think people's mindset's starting to change and go, well, no, hey, between 30 and 50, I can actually be extremely athletic and extremely fit and healthy between those 20 years as well. And then all of a sudden, that's what's giving people a new lease of life, because it is reality that with the right training process and the right education, 30 and 50 doesn't have to be a decline. You know, I've got clients that I work with that have hit their biggest numbers at 50 years old. And I go, it's not necessarily in weightlifting the fact that their body is not performing like it is when it's 30 years old. When you look at someone's training age, they're still very young. You know, if someone's never trained much, they've had an office job from straight out of school and they're now 35, 40 and going, I feel like a piece of shit, and they've never spent any time training. And then you take hold of them and you go, well, you're brand new to me now. You're a baby. You're at year one of your training. There's so much gains and progress to be made, even from the age of 30 or 40 years up, because of their training age being so young. And people are limited by their biological age, and they shouldn't be, because I always look at a client when they say to me, oh, Sonny, I'm old, I'm 47. I go, how long have you been training for? They go, oh, maybe 6 months. I'm like, you're a baby.
Brilliant. Yeah.
You know, and you should be excited and shouldn't be limited by the fact that you feel old because your biological age is. It's like you're young because your deliberate training age is so small. And that's valuable to understand as well, because yeah, okay, you've gone to the gym from the age of 20 to 30 because your mates did, and you dipped in and out of Globo gym, did a few curls and walked out. That doesn't count. Training deliberately and with guidance from an expert with a clear plan and process that you want to achieve, that's deliberate training. And that's what's going to yield you the results that are going to have that long-lasting effect.
Massively so. Massively so. So environment, I think it's something you take control of really well. I think you're hyper aware of it, and you've said some things today that confirm that to me. You are awaiting a visa to get into Dubai for what you've already described as a positive environment shift for you. It's a buzzword that I've been reflecting on an awful lot this year, to the point where I'm moving house. I'm spending a lot more time up and down here. I'm over in Austin in October to just sort of bask in everything going on over there. It's difficult to change your environment in a conventional setting. I think we're quite fortunate that we can have a little bit more flexibility in the positions that we are to sort of change things quickly. But I think environment is one of the biggest challenges that people face in the modern world when it comes to managing their well-being and understanding their priorities. So given that you seem to be an expert at this point and have a lot of self-awareness in understanding how to manipulate your environment to get the best out of yourself, what would be your biggest pieces of advice for anyone that might need an environment change? What are the questions they should be asking themselves about their environment?
Yeah, I think the first thing before you even worry about your environment is aligning, like I said, those core things that are important to you to feel good. Because like in anything, in any good relationship, you have to be happy in yourself and be in a good place before you can enter into a relationship with someone else. The same thing applies when you're thinking about your training environment. You need that core foundation of the sleep, the nutrition, the feeling good first of all, before you can look to insert yourself into another environment or create an environment of people around you to help yourself move forward. So that's the first element in this. Now, when you're traveling, that's the thing that stays with you everywhere you go. So your core values when it comes to your health and fitness, wherever you are located, stays with you. Whether that be the types of food you eat, the amount of hours you like to sleep, your day-to-day routine, that's something that stays with you. The second thing is, if you don't have the luxury to be able to relocate yourself in and around the training environment, i.e. the gym, and the skill sets of people that is going to help you succeed, then you've got to look at ways in which you can make them appear around you. And I'll unpack that a little bit further. What I'm saying is, if you've got goals to be an amazing Olympic weightlifter, and you know that there is 5 very good weightlifters that are an hour away, and it's not possible for you to relocate that hour or those 6 hours away to be with those people, then what you need to do then instead is think about, okay, is there a way that I can surround those people around me? And if it's not physically available to help someone move and relocate around you, or create a gym environment that is important to be able to facilitate your training as best as possible, then this is where you need to utilize the online community and the online world to have regular touch points and interactions with people that are going to positively lift you up, I guess, from a community standpoint to excel. Because the thing is, if you're having conversations and spending time with people that are doing what you want to be doing, or have the knowledge and the skill sets that you want on a regular basis, that in itself is a huge improvement to your environment. And like I said, we come back to the fact that, okay, yeah, it's easy for me to say, okay, I can relocate country because I want to be around ambitious people. If that isn't the case and that's not a reality, it's like, okay, how do I spend time with those ambitious people on a regular basis? Can I provide them to come and stay with me? Can I invite people to come and be near where I am? What can I do to facilitate that? And then in another instance, it's like, what community can I join, or group can I join? There's lots of people in that are adding value for that aspect. And that's something that I applied in my early stages of business, in the sense that there was things that I needed or to understand or to learn that I didn't have in one of my businesses. I made an extended effort for 6 months every single week to speak to someone that had more knowledge than me in that area. And if you don't ask the questions and you don't reach out to people to see, you'll never know. And that is a perfect example of how you can surround yourself with a more knowledgeable environment to a goal that you want to achieve without necessarily having to relocate or uplift your world.
Nothing changes if nothing changes. It's sort of the cliche you can throw at this one, isn't it? And I think, again, in a training setting, in a business setting, in a work setting, is why networking in financial institutions has become so pivotal, because you can meet people you can do things with, you can interact with people who you can move laterally in a job setting. These are all pretty standard things in a professional setting, but if we can become isolated in our own world, it's easy to forget that there's probably things closer to us than we realize that will help manipulate a negative interaction with our environment. Even things like the whole Navy SEAL, make your bed first thing in the morning stuff, it's a state change. It's creating an environment that will have a slight positive uptick that means that might lead to momentum elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And for me this year, it's been a huge thing to sort of address who is available to me, what is available to me close by, what is further away, who do I need to get on the phone to, who do I need to have a regular call with, what do I need to allocate time to, and then actually take action on it rather than just sort of conceptualize it. And I think a lot of conversations I have on the topic tend to be, well, I can't do this because of this, or this can't happen because of this. And it doesn't need to be, oh, well, I can't move to Dubai because I can't move to Dubai to train in that gym with those people for that reason because I've got this job. It's like, okay, well, how can you in your world manipulate things a little bit more to extract more from your environment? Because there's no blueprint, because we're all individuals, but the mechanisms are all quite similar in many ways, isn't it? You've got to go looking.
And it does require effort, at the end of the day. It's easy, like you said, for any of us to make an excuse as to why we didn't do something. But again, when I think about, okay, I'm going to put myself in that situation now where I know that there's things that I could have been doing that would have been beneficial or helpful to me, and I've chose no, or I've been lazy about it. It's because I hadn't got really clear with what the benefit is of doing this. And that's where, like, if your goal is to, improve your health and performance from a training standpoint, get really clear as to how that benefit is going to impact your life, or how that change is going to impact your life, because it makes it much easier for you to then make those good decisions each day that are going to result in a better environment, better performance in whatever you do.
Final question. How much has your definition of success changed from, I guess, 2018, having to find a way to make a living, land on your own 2 feet after a challenging period of time, but having achieved the Olympic dream, to now? Because I feel like that's evolved an awful lot. What are the things that are most important to you at your core? As you've referenced them in other people a lot, but if you could list them out to you, what are they?
Yeah, I think the biggest change that, again, I reflect on now is I'm no longer doing things because I think they're the things that I need to do in order to other people to think I'm successful. And instead now I'm investing time and energy into the things that are going to bring me the feeling of personal fulfillment and success. And this is where I'd say things have gone a lot more internal. Like from the age of like 20 to 30, or in that time frame that you're referring to, I was always trying to prove to someone else, or to prove to, externally what success looks like. You think, who decided the Olympics is success? Like, it is because it's the biggest possible sporting event. Okay, so I thought of that as that's how people are going to see me as successful in sport, because I'm an Olympian. And the biggest change that's happened now is, instead of worrying about what someone else is deeming successful, I'm aligning with myself. What are the core important things to me? My happiness, having a purpose and a reason to wake up each morning, my own personal fitness of how I feel in my health and wellness. These are the things that are now important, and they're the things that are now defining I'm successful. And if I can keep myself fit, healthy, have a good network of people to be able to train around, be able to see improvements in the new training modalities that I'm including in my training, that's what success looks like to me. So in answer to your question, it's taking away from what other people think about and looking more internally about what is going to make me feel successful.
Very wise. Very wise. Lots of similarities in my own evolution, I'd say. Well, Sonny, it's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to next time we can get together and either take you through your first 10K or further, and you can teach me how to clean 140 kilos, because a 3-plate clean would be nice. And to be honest, Olympic weightlifting is probably the sort of training discipline that I've neglected the most over the years. So I'd like to...
It's probably the one that would be really cool for you to see you do, because you've got that huge upside in the...
Yeah.
From an engine standpoint, it wouldn't take too much to get you snatching 120 and clean and jerk and 150, you know, to be able to go 150 clean and jerk into a ridiculous 10K or something like that.
I have a super total related idea. I'll drop you a message. But yes, we shall see. We shall see. Thank you again.
Cheers.